The morning sun rises over Lansing, Michigan, casting long shadows across the streets where a young Steven Seagal once walked, dreaming of martial arts mastery and Hollywood stardom. Few could have predicted that this intense, soft-spoken boy would transform into one of action cinema's most recognizable figures, and ultimately, one of America's most shocking traitors. But today, at age 72, the man who built his career on portraying incorruptible heroes fighting against corruption and injustice has been sentenced to life imprisonment for espionage against the United States, bringing a stunning end to what prosecutors have called one of the longest-running and most damaging infiltration operations in American history. Born in Lansing in 1952, Stephen Frederick Seagal's early life gave little indication of the extraordinary and ultimately treacherous path that lay ahead. The son of a medical technician and a math teacher, young Stephen developed an early fascination with Asian culture and martial arts. This interest would become an obsession that led him to Japan in his late teens, where he immersed himself in the study of Aikido. "I found something in Japan that I couldn't find in America," Seagal would often recall in interviews. "A discipline, a philosophy, a way of moving through the world that made sense to me." What investigators now believe, however, is that Seagal found something else during those formative years in Japan. His first contact with Russian intelligence operatives, who recognized in the young American a potential long-term asset. Court documents reveal that Seagal's recruitment likely occurred between 1973 and 1975, during a period when Soviet intelligence was actively seeking to develop sleeper agents with potential for cultural influence. "The perfect agent isn't the one who can steal a document today," explained former CIA counterintelligence officer Marcus Weatherby. "It's the one who can spend decades building a position of influence and access." Seagal was a masterclass in patient intelligence work. Returning to America in the late 1970s, Seagal established himself as a respected Aikido instructor in Los Angeles, opening a dojo that attracted celebrity clients. This entree into Hollywood circles eventually led to his breakthrough in the film industry, with 1988's Above the Law, in which he portrayed a former CIA operative fighting corruption, an irony that prosecutors would later note in their sentencing recommendations. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, Seagal built a successful career as an action star with films like Hard to Kill, Marked for Death, and Under Siege. His on-screen persona, the stoic, uncompromising warrior fighting against corrupt systems, resonated with audiences worldwide and established him as one of the genre's most bankable stars. Behind this rising Hollywood career, however, prosecutors have now revealed a pattern of activities consistent with intelligence gathering and influence operations. Seagal's production company, which insisted on unusual levels of access to military installations for research, his cultivation of relationships with law enforcement agencies across the country, and his seemingly inexplicable meetings with foreign officials now appear as components of a sophisticated intelligence operation. "He wasn't just playing a government operative in movies," stated FBI Director Eleanor Simmons at a press conference following the verdict. "He was using his celebrity status to gain access to sensitive locations, influential people, and information that would have been denied to almost anyone else." By the early 2000s, as Seagal's Hollywood star began to fade, his connections to Russia became increasingly public. He developed a close relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, received Russian citizenship in 2016, and was appointed as Russia's special envoy to the United States in 2018. What appeared to many as the eccentric choices of an aging action star was, according to prosecutors, the culmination of a decades-long intelligence operation, moving into its final, most productive phase. Seagal's embrace of Russia wasn't a late career pivot, explained Assistant U.S. Attorney James Donovan, who led the prosecution. It was the revelation of his true allegiance after decades of cover. The investigation that would ultimately lead to Seagal's arrest began not with his Russian connections, but with financial irregularities discovered during a routine IRS audit in 2019. Investigators uncovered a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that had processed millions of dollars in payments from entities linked to Russian intelligence services. These financial trails led to the discovery of encrypted communications, dead drops, and other tradecraft consistent with espionage activities. When federal agents raided Seagal's ranch in New Mexico in 2022, they discovered what prosecutors would later describe as a treasure trove of espionage materials, specialized communications equipment, documents detailing the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure, and most damning of all, a comprehensive archive of intelligence reports Seagal had compiled and transmitted to his Russian handlers over decades. The trial, which began in January 2024, revealed the extraordinary scope of Seagal's activities. Prosecutors presented evidence that he had used his production company as cover to photograph sensitive military installations, exploited his relationships with law enforcement to gather intelligence on federal agents, and leveraged his celebrity status to influence public opinion on issues of importance to Russian foreign policy. Perhaps most disturbing were the testimonies from former associates who described Seagal's methodical efforts to cultivate relationships with government officials, military contractors, and technology executives, relationships that gave him access to information about weapons systems, cybersecurity protocols, and defense planning. He would casually mention during a dinner party that he was working on a film about submarine warfare and needed technical details for authenticity, testified one former Pentagon consultant. Before you knew it, you were explaining classified capabilities to him, thinking you were just helping with a movie. Throughout the proceedings, Seagal maintained his innocence, with his defense team attempting to portray the government's case as a politically motivated persecution of an American who had simply developed cultural and business interests in Russia. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors introduced recordings of Seagal speaking in fluent Russian with his handlers, a language he had publicly claimed to barely understand, discussing intelligence objectives and American vulnerabilities. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts of espionage, conspiracy, acting as an unregistered foreign agent, and money laundering. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Caroline Mendez delivered a scathing assessment before announcing the life sentence. "Mr. Seagal, you portrayed heroes on screen while betraying your country in reality," she stated. "You exploited the freedoms and opportunities America gave you to undermine the very system that allowed you to prosper. The damage you have done to national security and to the trust Americans place in their institutions cannot be overstated." The sentencing has sent shockwaves through Hollywood and Washington alike. Former colleagues have expressed feelings of betrayal and disbelief as they reconcile the man they worked with and the double life revealed in court. "I still can't process it," said former Under Siege director Andrew Davis. "We made films about fighting for America, about honor and loyalty, while I just can't wrap my head around it." For intelligence professionals, the case represents both a significant counterintelligence success and a sobering reminder of the long-term nature of foreign intelligence operations. "This wasn't a quick smash-and-grab operation," noted former NSA Director Admiral James Hollister. "This was patient, methodical intelligence work spanning nearly 5 decades. Seagal's case will be studied in counterintelligence training for generations." As Steven Seagal begins his life sentence at the Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, the highest security federal prison in the United States, the full impact of his betrayal is still being assessed. Intelligence agencies continue to evaluate which operations may have been compromised, which foreign policy decisions may have been influenced, and what vulnerabilities may have been exposed during his decades of espionage. For fans worldwide, the case creates a painful contradiction. The films that once entertained millions now appear in a sinister new light. The stories of an American hero fighting corruption were created by a man who had pledged allegiance to a foreign power. The martial arts philosophy of honor and integrity that Seagal espoused throughout his career stands in stark contrast to the deception that defined his true life's work. "The greatest performance Steven Seagal ever gave wasn't in any of his films," concluded Prosecutor Donovan in his closing statement. "It was the decades-long portrayal of a patriotic American while he systematically betrayed his country." As one former fan stated outside the courthouse after sentencing, "He taught a generation of us about honor through his films and martial arts. Now he's taught us about betrayal through his actions. I don't know which lesson will last longer."